Rachel? Rachel, you're okay with that?
Yes, of course.
Okay. So to introduce our speaker today is Rachel Pfeffer. She is the AEU Interim Executive Director with more than 25 years of experience as an executive manager, organizational development coach, and fund developer. Rachel has managed 17 different social justice focused agencies through their transition in the nonprofit, philanthropic, public, and educational sectors. She enjoys doing the heavy lifting by embracing the conditions for organizations to thrive, and she has been called the Mary Poppins of nonprofits. At this point, I will go ahead and turn the floor over to Rachel.
Thanks, Eric. Hi, everyone. Good morning.
Morning.
Thanks very much for having me today. I have a little bit of a slideshow, and I'm going to share these slides after, so I might go through them, and spend some time, but not a ton of time on them, but I'll share them with you afterwards. And of course, it might be hard for me to look at the chat when you're during this, but I'm happy if you want to talk or ask any questions, feel free to, or we can wait till the end, okay? I guess I want to start with saying that I started December 1st, and I've been very busy. This is why the B is there. But it's been really an honor to work with the American Ethical Union. I do love doing this transition work. It's really not for everybody because, you bring in perspectives that people might feel a little scared about, or, might bring up things to people that they don't want to really know, but they knew. And here I am saying it again and saying, hey, we need to look at how we can thrive as an organization. And there might be some difficult choices that you have to make. And I would say that it's taken me a few months to get to that place to really understand what the AEU is all about. And I've met with a number of societies, but I wouldn't say that I really understand enough about societies, but it's been really an honor to speak with societies and have conversations with them. So I'll let you I'll go through this and then kind of tell you where I am right now, because this kind of takes you through my trajectory of thinking. So just today, I wanted you to take away some key things, which is what is organizational transition, how I do it, that I've been basically listening and observing for the first 60 to 90 days. I've been able to give some presentations to the board, only a few, because I haven't been here that long, about roles and responsibilities of boards of directors, that there are different types of boards of directors that prioritize different kinds of work, that there's well-known structures for boards that have been studied and people get their PhDs on them and study and write books on them, and you can take trainings on them. And I just wanted to share as much information as I have, with the board, and then people can decide what they want to do, of course. I think one of the most important things of doing this work is the healing aspect that has to occur in a transition. And I say that because before we can fortify an organization or be creative, think about designs and things that would work going forward, there has to be some way to address past harms, things that people are carrying around with them, baggage, whatever it is, either in relationships or within the organization at large. And then one of the things I'd like to do also is hear your recommendations, if there's anything that you would like to have me focus on, that because I haven't, spoken with you before. This is my general, I know it's a lot of words, don't even look at it. This is my general kind of map of what I'm going to do with an organization when I do transition. I'm going to look at your finances. I mean, really look at your finances. There's how they're structured, what the line items are, like very, very detailed. I'm going to look at how you raise money and where the money goes to and what kind of materials you have and how you spread the word and, what your communications architecture is like. What capacities do you have, both in finances and fundraising? I'm going to look at staff and what their capacities are. What are they doing? I'm going to review their job descriptions. I'm going to think, do these job descriptions match what the organization needs? I'm going to look at what programs and how you organize. Do you have a strategic plan? Did you do a strategic plan and then forget to do the work to make the strategic plan happen, which is often what happens in organizations, because the people are so exhausted by the end of doing a strategic plan that they can't actually implement the strategic plan. I'm going to look at all your operations. I'm going to look at your partner organizations and see if, what kind of relationships you have. And does it make sense that you have these relationships given where the organization says they want to go, okay, or what they're doing. And then, of course, I'm going to look at the board and see if the board is functioning in the best way possible to be the best governance, apparatus that you can have. What are the relationships like? Are we getting through meetings easily? Are we collaborative? Do we trust each other? All these things are critical to any organization going through a transition. So from December to March, I've met with over 85 people, and I'm attending all the committee meetings. I'm meeting with the president's board. I'm doing some experiments. And I'll talk more about that. I'm looking at your budget, doing some budget modifications. We are able to move some money into the assembly, and I'll talk more about that in terms of doing some kind of trainings and offering grant program. And I'm looking at the apportionment. Like everybody says, the apportionment is, super complicated and nobody understands it. And so I've started to unpack it with Hank, who's the meister of it, and figuring out, is there a better way to do apportionment that's more equitable? What does that look like? So I'm looking at all your systems and everything you do. I've been to the New York office. And so basically I'm just doing a lot of assessment, observing. When I first got here in December, it's like year-end appeal, like who do we send appeals to? So I did some research and ran some reports. And as you can see, the AEU has been losing donations, right? If you could look from 2021, there was 198 active donors. In 2022, when I first arrived, it was 132. So we lost quite a few. So, my first thing was who are they? How do we get back to them? How do we encourage them to give money? Because that is a significant loss. And I know COVID, a lot of organizations, especially national ones, lost a lot of money. And so we did do an appeal, and we did do some work, but the reality is that the AEU hasn't had the capacity to raise money for a long time. So as I just said, we're talking about apportionment. And one of the things I've come across a lot is that people are like, well, we give money to the AEU, what do we give money for? And when I was able to do the budget modification and kind of realign how the budget's even laid out, I was able to actually see for the first time that the AEU spends it's about $350,000 budget. It's pretty small. At this point, they spend over $83,000 on education for leaders, visiting leaders, and consulting leader program. And that's a significant amount of money for an organization out there. But I feel like talking about apportionment is a much bigger question that talks about connectivity, that really has more to do with what is our interrelationship? Is there equity? I think looking at resource management, investing in sustainability, what are we doing as an organization, as a national organization, to kind of use our funds in the best way possible? And even though the apportionment was set up, 100 years ago, is this the best way to set things up now? And I guess those are my questions. And these are really good conversations to have with societies, I think. I did look at, you had a survey that was done last year. I don't know if anybody was took in that. There were a lot of questions. I had a lot of feedback when I showed the slide to people that, some things, didn't make sense on the survey, but at the end of the day, I walked away from that survey, regardless of what the methodology was to ask the questions, and basically saw that the President's Council, the Annual Assembly, the All Societies platform, event announcements, so I'll get to that in a minute, leaders training, visiting leaders, which we just talked about, were the things that really mattered most to societies, whether they're big societies or little societies. Even that whole dichotomy of like big societies, little societies, and that there's a difference, I'm not sure there is. So anyway, just putting it out there. One of the assets that I was looking into was the connections calendar. Some societies use it, some societies don't. Some societies think it's not useful. But so I did just a year analysis of what that looked like. Again, this is part of the resources that are available, or the capacity that the AEU offers to societies to get their events out. And I would say only about 50% of the societies, just over 50%, use the calendar to promote their events. I've been talking to the President's Council. I presented January 5th, and then I spoke to them again, and it's really like a great forum to talk to the societies. And I'll be talking again in April with them. As I talked a little bit about the healing process, what I noticed was that there's a lot of stress in the system. And when I say the system, I mean, I guess mostly the AEU board and the committees and getting things done, getting people on committees. You know, there's like 11 standing committees, but there's not enough people to actually put them on the committees. And so it's very stressful in that regard, but there's also a lot of other stress. There's been ruptures. There's been, you know, clergy misconduct that people are still feeling very stressed. It wasn't just, you know, a couple of years ago, it's happened before, but there really was no institutional way to respond to that. And so a lot of people don't know about that. And, you know, it's a lot of stuff kind of swept under the rug, but nothing ever really gets swept under the rug. I want to switch gears for a minute because the way I've been thinking is that there've been a lot of problems, and this is kind of like step back, and I'm not talking about societies within the ethical culture. When society does not solve a problem, I'm talking about our society at large. I'm saying that when we don't solve problems, right, this leads to collapse and crisis. And this is kind of where we're at. We have a lot of existential issues right now that we're dealing with, a lot of very practical and important issues that we're dealing with. We've polluted all our waterways. We've, you know, polluted all our fish. We've degraded our ecosystem. And this is due to not solving problems, right? I think we can all pretty much agree to that. So in taking that framework and applying it to the AEU, what's contributed to the crisis at the AEU? And again, it's unsolved problems. It's almost like the AEU lost its muscle to solve problems over the years. I'm not sure exactly what happened. You know, did people just decide not to solve problems that were too big, it was too overwhelming? But these are problems that the AEU faces. You know, there's long-term white supremacy, institutionalized racism, unconscious bias, microaggressions, and also other kinds of implicit bias that goes on around. There's elitism, there's, you know, heterosexism, there's a ton of stuff that has not been addressed. And one of the ways that the AEU has addressed things, and I'm not saying societies do this, but, you know, is read a book or, take a training, listen to a lecture, but it hasn't become integrated into the actual behavior, the actual policies. You know, I know that your society, Mid Rivers, is growing, and I'm sure that, you know, that has to do with a lot of amazing things that you're doing. The AEU and other societies, without addressing this particular, especially supremacy culture, right? I'm not talking about like everyone's a Ku Klux Klan. I'm talking about culture and how that manifests itself and how people feel comfortable or don't feel comfortable. It's going to be very hard for societies to bring new people in, especially young people who have a different consciousness that, like people my age, although I do have that consciousness, but young people are very astute and very clear that they're not that interested in being part of an organization where, you know, old white people are unconscious. You know, it's just not gonna bring people in. And so I'm hoping that the AEU will address this, because I do think that it's a long time coming. There's also other issues of underpaid and underemployed staff and leaders. You know, some people have said, and I've heard this in meetings, people don't want their children to become leaders because it's not a stable economic profession for them. And it definitely is not. We have not provided economic stability for leaders. The AEU has not, even though they certify them. There are leaders that don't have societies and societies that don't have leaders who want them. So I think that there's like a disconnect there. And some of it has to do with very structural stuff like being underpaid and other things as well that are structural. The board structure. The board, and I'll talk about this in a little bit, we're not going to spend a lot of time on it. The board structure, the board manages like they don't have staff, like they have to do everything. And I'm not saying Bill, not Bill, but everyone else. Like they don't have staff, and that, you know, they have to be involved in everything that happens. And by doing that, they've become a weaker board, and they have become a weaker board as a result of that. But there's other reasons as well. And it's very hard to build, and they've really, the AEU is quite eviscerated. You know, it's like there's me and there's Jake and that's it. And there's not a lot of capacity in the organization to do anything for the societies, actually. So besides the leader training, which we can talk about as well. So these are just some things that have been unsolved. So I was just talking about there's different kinds of boards, management boards, purpose-driven boards, traditional framing of the board role. And I've just been trying to kind of talk about this for the last few months, different board responsibilities, boards that are most successful at the national level set strategic direction. But again, there's different boards. Some boards do everything. They're the operations, and that's fine. As long as you're also doing the other part, right? You're also setting strategic direction. 3 wheels of effective governance. This is really basic: behavior, structure, and expectations. If one of these is off, you have a flat tire. So these are just some behaviors, different kinds of structures. What do bylaws do? What does agenda creation do? What are having, board officers? What does the structure mean to an organization, and how to really understand how to make that strong? And then setting up expectations so everybody knows what they're supposed to do on the board. A lot of times we call that onboarding or board orientation. Sometimes there's board buddies. So there's different ways in which I've been talking to the board about that. And of course, there's the responsibilities of ethical standards. And what I mean by that, and I always say this because talking to the Ethical Society about ethical standards feels a little awkward. However, beyond the ethical standards that boards are, I feel like there's some disconnect as well with the AEU, because board members they themselves do not have any power. It's only the collective that has power. So a board member can't go into like a staff person and say, I want to see this, I want to see that. They don't have any power, only the collective does. And a committee is an appendage of the board. So a committee cannot be free to do whatever it wants. It needs to be doing what the board has delegated its tasks to be for the committee. And some of that has also been a disconnect in the AEU. Here's some resources. I wanted to bring up a little bit about the assembly coming up. Anya Overman from St. Louis and I are the co-chairs of the educational part of the assembly. And what we're going to be doing is offering 2 things. One is community gatherings. There's going to be grants to societies to get together with a society that's near them and have like a gathering, a potluck or something. And so there'll be like $500 grants. You can hire music, you can enhance your food, but we want societies to get together. And I think we're going to be June, July, or August. This will be coming out soon. And the second thing we're doing is we're going to be offering, we don't have a date yet. We're hiring professional trainers to provide restorative justice circle keeping training to 100 people. So we're hoping 4 from every society. It'll be a 2-day training. There'll be a webinar before as an introduction, like a commercial, so you can see what it's about, the philosophy, why it's even important, why do it, why get this skill. And then, so there'll be then the 2-day training, and then there'll be a follow-up. There's a third piece, which is how are the societies going to use their restorative justice work? Because you can do a lot of stuff in the communities. I've been a circle keeper for many years. I've done a lot of work in schools, in prisons, stopping the school to prison pipeline, trying to get, because right now, and I don't know what it's like in your area, but a lot of young people of color, they get in trouble in school, they end up getting suspended, they get suspended, they end up getting in trouble because they're not in school, then they, end up in prison. And there's a huge disproportionate trajectory for that. It's, and what restorative justice does is it goes into the schools and it creates a different environment where people can be brought in and resolve and take care of the harms that were done so that someone doesn't have to be expelled, canceled from school, and sent into what's clearly a trajectory that is out of the community and not good for anybody. So we can talk more about that. I had a town hall in February looking at kind of the what I called wicked problems, and wicked problems are not like the worst problems ever. But it does make me want to do the evil laugh. Anyway, but they're problems that have a very specific elements to them that are very difficult to solve, and the typical problem solving way of approaching things doesn't work. And so we were looking at the consulting leader program, and I know Jill's been involved in that, and we're talking about how do we use a different kind of approach to bring this program alive again, and in maybe a different way, so that it becomes something that can continue without getting stalled for particular reasons. And one of the things, just real quick, that makes a wicked problem is that there's lots of opinions about things. And opinions are obviously good, but not when they become barriers to moving forward, right? That if there can be no agreement. And that's sort of what's happened. There's been a long-term leadership vacuum in the leadership realm of the AEU. So training leaders, visiting leaders, consulting leaders, the NLC, the National Leaders Council, all of that really is not under one umbrella, and really is very compartmentalized. They don't really talk to each other. And there's sort of, I call it a leadership vacuum, is that there's no way in which they together can look to either a collaborative group of people like the officers of the NLC and say, we want all of these parts to talk to each other. How do we do this? Let's talk about this. And that doesn't exist. And that's what I call a leadership vacuum. This is what I call the Triple L working group. We're generating creative approaches to the consulting leader program. We're using design thinking. We're developing empathy for the societies who are seeking a consulting leader. Then we're going to identify the needs of the society. Once we develop empathy, we're also talking to the leaders to get empathy with them. So it's really kind of a grassroots approach. We're going to develop some ideas, and then we're going to do a prototype, and probably we're going to make mistakes. If you want to find out more about this, on March 21st, I guess that's Tuesday already, we're going to be talking about what the LLL working group has been doing. And these are the elements of a wicked problem. There's no right answer, no stopping rule or test to know if you've solved it. And we have to be accountable and responsible for making meaning and doing things wrong, which, often people don't do. We're going to do that. One thing I've been doing is trying to make Jake Ritter's job, he's the communications person, a little bit less clunky, because there's a lot of emails that go back and forth with him from the societies. And so we developed these communication packages, and we've been asking societies if one of these packages might work for you. And there's kind of, that idea of setting up expectations. So it sets up an expectation on Saturday to happen when you send a event that you want the AEU to promote. And so and there's no charge for this. We've just basically, there's a basic one, there's a premium one, and there's a plus one. And so, if there's one that you would like to pick, let me know. Here's some resources about tackling wicked problems. Okay, now I'm going to talk about systems change, and I'm actually going to kind of read this. So I'm sort of at the end of my normal presentation, and there's like a whole other presentation that I just gave to the board yesterday. And this is kind of the start of it. And I can talk more about it, but I want to give the board a little bit of time, the AEU board, to kind of process it before they kind of decide what the way forward is. And I'm doing this because there needs to be a way forward. And so I'm taking a systems change approach, right? And let me explain. I'm going to read this. A systems change follows a change in the root cause of an issue, as opposed to surface level change, which only addresses symptoms, meaning a change effort has not shifted the system to a new state. And just to take a breath here, I'm an example of a symptom level approach. Hiring an interim executive director or an executive director means that everything's going to pretty much stay the same. We're going to have a hard time. And there's been a lot of contention with me and the board to kind of figure out, what is my role here, right? Because as an interim, or the kind of interim I am, and I was very clear in my interview, as Bill can attest to, that I'm not an interim that comes in and babysits. I'm an interim that's going to look for things like this, for like, what does this organization really need to thrive and continue, even if it's really hard. So, so bringing an interim into a system is not necessarily an approach that results in positive outcomes. Confronting root causes by transforming structures and policies, strengthening the collective power through active collaboration of diverse people and organizations. For effective use of this approach, openness and collaboration are critical. And if the system change requires widespread adoption and replication of a solution, it will be difficult if the owner holds onto it, meaning changing our ways of work. We might have to change our ways of working. It can not be achieved alone and requires a coalition of many. So I see this as something that the societies are going to need to buy into. Just, this is how I'm thinking about it. So the system change generally needs a different type of leadership. Successfully collective action requires care and attention, such as ensuring that the vision and ownership are shared, which will be difficult if the leader places themselves at the center rather than the shared vision of the collaborators. And otherwise it remains transactional and it will fall short of actually leveraging the collective power. System change, of course, needs system thinking, continuous learning and adaptation by thoughtfully considering the dynamics, the interconnected elements of a system like roles, relationships, and norms. And that's the end. Thank you for listening. And I'm grateful for the salmon who do the impossible. And now I would love to have a conversation with you. Are we good for time? We have a little bit of time. Okay, great.
Oh yeah, we're good on time. Yeah, we got 23 minutes. So does anybody have any direct questions for Rachel about anything she just covered? The only thing, two notes I had was you talked about the town hall meeting that you're having on the 21st.
Yeah.
Do we have a link to that so anybody can join? I'm assuming it's going to be a Zoom meeting, or?
It is a Zoom meeting, and I will drop that in the chat.
Okay. And then the presentation you just gave, is it possible to get a copy of that?
Oh yeah, I'm going to send you a PDF of that right after this meeting, so you could have that.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. I appreciate everything covered and everything that you're trying to accomplish. I know it's been pretty from talking with Bill about it, it's been a lot of work. But like I said, I'll just open up the floor for anybody that has any comments or questions, and then we'll just have a conversation.
And you can feel free to just, I don't have to call it.
Learn it out, people.
Rachel, Rachel, can you comment on just from your point of view, maybe strengths and weaknesses that you see between societies that have professional leadership and those that don't? Do you have a?
Yeah, I wish I could. I'm sorry, what?
I just wondered if you have an opinion one way or the other.
I don't. I really do not. I don't feel like I know enough. And, the issue of, polity, which is, the societies get to decide whatever they want to decide when they want to decide it. I think is a very strong value that you follow, or principle. And I think that's my first directive is, kind of like Star Trek, don't get involved in those issues. I don't see that. I don't really have an opinion, on that. I don't know. It seems like there really is no answer, to tell you the truth. I think it matters from what I can say, to tell you the truth. I think it matters who the leader is and how they're serving the society.
Thanks.
This is Sarah. I have a question, and I might have missed something, so excuse this. I think I'm taking us a little further back, but is there a problem statement or a list of problems that the AEU is trying to address through this process? Like, what was the beginning of it?
I wasn't there when the board all had their conversations about that. Maybe Bill can fill you in. Not to put you on the spot.
Not my presentation.
Well, I wasn't there for like when you all got together and decided that we need an interim executive director. I mean, I can show you there's a town hall in the chat, the link to the Zoom. I mean, I can tell you what my scope of work looked like, but
I think the general, well, there was two different thinkings at that time. One was a placeholder, and the other one was to find somebody who would be a consultant and point out the problems that we had as an AEU entity. It actually, obviously, from listening to Rachel, she will tell you that we went with the consulting plan. And she has certainly opened a lot of eyes. And I think that what she has said to the board, to the AEU board, has been, I would say, received maybe not as well as everybody would like, but I think everybody is listening to her. Maybe they don't agree, but I think that they are listening. So, and I know she dropped a kind of a bomb yesterday on us, but and the board needs to unpack what she put together for us. So I don't know. Did that answer your question, Sarah? Because
Yeah, it sounds like, so part of this process is actually identifying the problems.
yes.
So we don't have a list of identified problems that Rachel is fixing. She's identifying problems and then working with all the societies to find solutions.
yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Exactly.
Thanks.
I'm not a
I missed that
fixer.
part.
I'm a blueberry. I'm an antioxidant.
Okay, thank you.
I don't put out fires. I don't fix things. I learned that in my first interim assignment in 2005. I had a CFO, an interim CFO that I hired, because when I was in the interview for that particular position, they told me some stuff that was going on. And I said, you need to let your finance person go, like as soon as you leave the room with me, go and have them leave. And they did, for really good reason. That person was doing something so it's like that. Like and then the CFO that I hired, she said, you're like a blueberry. And she made this whole, art project, glass blueberries. You're an antioxidant. And I have to say that was a very good framing for me in all the work that I've been doing since then. And so, yeah, I'm looking where things are not healthy, and I'm trying to identify that and see what are the ways in which we can, as a collaborative and as a system, make things healthier.
There's a question in the chat that says, what are some of the strengths that you've noticed in the AEU?
In the AEU, and you mean by like the AEU, you mean the board and the staff of the AEU, or you mean the whole society system?
Either, both.
I think the board has some amazing board members. Bill, of course, is one of them, really embracing and open and smart and dedicated and committed. And I think that really makes for a very strong board, but there's tension on the board because not everybody's there. I think another element that's very positive is the societies. I mean, I feel like the AEU is completely in service to the societies, and it's the societies that keep the AEU afloat, and direct it strategically. And, maybe we've gotten lost in some of that. That hasn't been as strong a message. And I haven't been here that long. So, it's hard for me. I would say that those are the two very strong elements of the AEU.
Okay. One of the things that I picked up on in your conversation was trying to get neighboring societies together, to just intermingle. And that is something that I have always wanted to see more of within there, because it feels like we're just little islands all throughout the United States. We're not one, I mean, we all share the same name, same ideas and everything else. Obviously us getting together with the New York Society would be a little bit costly, but getting together with the St. Louis and doing more with St. Louis, I think would be great, and having that structure. But just also trying to bring us all together a little bit better, I think is awesome.
Yeah, I think it'll be, and to do something fun together, you know?
Yeah.
I think that'll be really fun. What do you all think about the restorative justice? Do you want more information on that? Like what that is? What am I talking about? That kind of thing? Yeah,
Seeing a couple
a
heads,
little bit.
nods, and thumbs up.
Okay, cool.
Oh, yes.
So I don't know if anyone's heard of it, but we have to thank our the Maori people of New Zealand for this practice, which came here in the 1970s through work with the Maoris. They basically have a practice, and most American Indian people also have a practice of circling up in order to resolve issues within the community. And I say we come from the Maoris because the Maoris in New Zealand were able to take their practice and make it more mainstream outside the Native community. And so they were able to address, they were losing a lot of their young people to the system, to the prison system. They were getting arrested, right? Like that, and they were losing. And so they basically went to the government and said, we don't want you to arrest our young people. We want you to use the system that we use within our communities. And they did. And they taught them the system of circling up to address the harm, called restorative justice. And they were able in the 90s to close down their juvenile detention center completely because it was mostly occupied by Maoris. And so it's been here since the 70s. The philosophy is different than retributive, right? So it's not about punishment. It's about addressing the harms that someone has experienced within your community. And so, for example, I've been trained by a lot of different people, and in Oakland, California, where I used to live, we were able to, if a young person got arrested, we had a relationship with the DA. They would send us the file. We would go, before this person was processed, we would go to the family. We would explain that this is another way of addressing what your young person and your family did. And if they agreed, because it's voluntary, then we would do this with the person who was harmed by that young person, and they would not go into the system. We did this in schools. We turned, and you can read about this. I mean, there's so much research on restorative justice in schools. So it's a way of sitting in community. You can do community building. It doesn't have to be a harm per se. You can have deeper conversations because there's a structure with it so that you're holding space and creating a space for everyone to be able to say what they need, and for people in the circle to commit to doing that with the people in the circle. So it's very community building. You can also put together plans from these that then followed up. So if the young person or the old person or whoever did the harm has to I commit to doing these 3 things, the circle comes together to make sure these things are happening. And as a circle keeper, you basically learn the structure and the practice of how to hold the space and have those conversations for your community. In the chat, can you talk a little bit about your efforts to support SEEK, the kids program? Okay, so my efforts to support, I'm not sure what SEEK is.
SEEK is the Sunday ethical education for kids.
Okay. So I met with the ethical educators, I think that's what you're talking about. And we had a meeting there weren't a lot of educators that came to that meeting. But Tricia, who from St. Louis, which I'm sure you know, who organizes the Youth Ethical Society Conference, which is actually coming up. I hope you've all seen that. We met to talk about how to do collaborative fundraising, because I think another strength of the ethical AEU or the societies is the ethical education piece for young people, and the actions and the activities that people are doing in their community. And I think that's would be very interesting in a context for funders to fund. And it also seemed like a way that we could support the ethical educations of young people was to come together. So we're doing some research into what local funders, like if, say if you and St. Louis got together and, could identify 3 or 4 different funders or more, which would be like community foundations, family foundations, and let's say banks, right? Because those are the, or others, they give away money. And the society came together and said, we want to do an ethical education and future program, for example. How are we going to teach young people how to make decisions in a very changing and difficult world from an ethical perspective, right? So we're teaching the ethical philosophy, as well as kind of inserting kind of even STEM issues, science and technology, and things far away. How are young people going to be doing that? Because they are going to be doing that. So we're still putting that together and identifying which societies could be working together and what funders would be interested in receiving. So then there would be like we would write the grant together, or more importantly, I would teach them how to talk to funders. We'd do like a 1-pager. I have a lot of experience raising money and starting things. So, it's hard to get money from foundations if you don't have a track record. That's really true, especially now. And so it's about how I think there'll be more strength in coming in together, collectively, collaboratively, with different societies working together. I don't know if I went too much in the weeds or said too little. Tell me if I answered your question.
Nope, she said that was perfect. It's my
Okay.
wife.
Oh, okay. Thank you. The AU seems like this thing for far away, the little idea about how it impacts us here and what it does. Would it be helpful to, it would help us to grow, to have more knowledge about the AU governance. Yeah. I totally understand that question. And that's something that I hear that all the time. There is a real disconnect between the AEU and the societies. I think that there were things in the past, there was like the lay leadership summer school that brought people together and that made sense and people really liked it. But in the last, I don't know how long, it's been a while since the AEU has been able to, you haven't had an assembly in person because of COVID. And that's, another factor. The governance structure is such, and actually right now they're looking for 2 board members for the next year. I just was at the board development committee meeting yesterday. If people are interested, I can give you the information. So there's representatives from, there's 11 board members and they represent different societies. But more importantly, board members need to represent, skill sets, like what skill sets people are bringing, right? So, because you have a treasurer, you have a vice president, a secretary, have president, and then have someone who's representative of the National Leaders Council, which are the leaders, capital L, and that's pretty much the governance structure. And they meet once a month at this point. I don't know can you ask me more specific questions before I go into like, if there's anything else you want to know about the board or the governance structure?
I can't really think of anything. It just seems like, I mean, I've been part of Mid Rivers for several years, and it just always seems like this thing far away that has nothing to do with our group. I know it does, but that's what it seems like.
It's structured that way on purpose, in a way. That concept of polity, which is, the mothership doesn't tell, everybody else what to do. It's structured that way, that it's far away and not telling you what to do.
But then I don't know what's going on there very much either, other than what's in the newsletters.
Right. And there's not a lot going on. I'm telling you what's going on. And I think that's the problem, that's one of the problems is the AEU's kind of lost some capacity. But that connectivity needs to be regenerated, right, between the societies, not in a way that violates your polity, but in a way that makes you feel connected. And that doesn't exist right now. I think you've identified a very salient issue. For real. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. I'm trying to be as transparent as possible because everybody needs to know, it's like, there's no reason not to tell everybody everything. So I'm going to tell you everything.
So I guess the bigger question is, what do we want from the AEU?
Right. And that what you ask for can actually be delivered. That's the question. What is the right size ask for the AEU? And I think until the AEU kind of figures out what their way forward is, you can ask, but I don't know that they can deliver. But yes, I think that discernment needs to happen from all the societies with the AEU. That discernment.
Yeah, so we can learn from what other ethical societies are doing. Instead of like reinventing the wheel for everything, how they maybe get involved and help their communities grow and be more ethical. So I think that interconnectedness would be helpful.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, every society, every community is different. So, but that mutual support is, so valuable.
Well, Rachel, thank you very much for everything. It was great having you on here. Great meeting you. I look forward to what you're doing. I think you're doing some great work from what I've been hearing from Bill and everything else. So, round of applause. If you have any other questions,
And congratulations on your new spouse.
yes, everybody. So we'll get to the announcements. First announcement: we signed a lease on our new location on Thursday. Working through a couple things, and I'll be sending out an email of work days, work schedules, everything else like that. Probably as soon as I get the keys, because right now we don't have the keys to the location. They're rekeying it right now. So, anyways, we'll be moving forward on that. So exciting times there. Other announcements next week. We will be having Daniel
Palminiac.
Thank you. Palminiac. He is a psychotherapist, former Catholic priest. He's former, correct, Jill?
Yes.
Yeah. And theologian, author and lecturer, and his book, What the Bible Really Said About Homosexuality, discussing that. We'll be meeting at Need, and more information will be coming out tomorrow with the newsletter. So, other than that, did anybody else have any other announcements? Am I missing something, Bill?
Yeah, I just want to remind everybody we are on for our trivia night for May 6th. We don't know the location. We're hoping to have it at our own location. What I'd like to ask of, pardon me, of the membership is to start looking for things that you have around the house that you think might make a basket. Because we do need to have some raffle baskets at it. So just if you've got some things laying around or some things that you think would be able to be put to a basket to offer to our membership there for the just keep that in mind, and you'll hear more from us as we move along.
And start putting together your teams.
Yeah, get your teams together.
Yes. Yeah, we all need to get. We'll start focusing on this just a little bit more here as we get on the next few weekends.
All right, great. Well, thank you, everybody. I hope everybody has a wonderful day. Rachel, again, thank you, and we will see you all next week.
Bye.
Bye,
See you next
everybody.
week.
Good week.
Bye, everybody.
See ya.
Bye.
Why aren't you clicking in?
Now I'm going to click it right now.